God's Fox is a genuinely mysterious and cheerful book about mental handicap, social deprivation, and emotional brutalisation. At least on the ground level, but it's about much more than that. Though the subject matter is often grim, the work has genuine beauty and hope. There are even glimmers of what religious people might call grace. This book is based around 20th century photographs taken mainly in the precincts of the old Prestwich Asylum, Lancashire. Many of the inmates were simply poor, epileptic, or socially undesirable. These images are the casual, lifelong artistic output of Charles Don Montgomery. Don kept the inmates warm through the Mancunian winters by his official work as boilerman, stoking the hospital's gigantic heating system. When daylight and heating duties allowed, Don took photographs. He did this compulsively, without any training, without any ambition. His surviving friend and co-creator of this book, Collings, said Don had no intention of preparing evidence for a report or documentary, no thoughts of exhibiting the images. This is perhaps the first reason for the book's strangeness. These are not lost photographs which were diverted from public view. They were taken and stashed in plastic bags, stuffed behind Don's sofa, under the sink, or up in the rafters with the loft lagging. Tens of thousands of images of patients and the hard-drinking, drug-taking community surrounding the hospital. It's a visual record of socially invisible people made, it seems, for the benefit of nobody. The second strangeness is that, at least to my eyes, there is no hint of moral judgment. Not one image looks like it's been framed to say, look at how these people suffer, or surely the government should do something. Nor are any of them framed to valorise the working class, or rather the underclass, in some sort of solidarity. There's no inverse snobbery, no attempt to heroise the men and women in their ill-fitting clothes and their frequently bruised faces. This amorality is not in the least bit cold or even clinical. It's humane, sensitive. It very much reminds me of Robert Lenkowitz's paintings from the Vagrancy, Old Age and Mental Handicaps projects made in the same decades at the opposite end of England. Interestingly, both the image makers worked in almost total artistic isolation. I suspect the amoral aura of their very different approaches is because they cared about their subject matter and cared not how or even if an audience might exist or react. It's about an inner demand to make images rather than making a case for or against anything. Alongside the Boilerman's photographs, Collings writes the history of people who were seldom fully present and didn't expect a future. Prestwich Asylum was once the most populous mental hospital in Europe, with well over 3,000 inmates. Much of Prestwich itself, known to insiders as the Village, was a social and economic expansion of the hospital, possessed by the same shape-shifting forces, the everyday angelic and demonic pressures, ironies, pleasures. And despite such local and 20th century roots, the writing is not a comfort blanket of nostalgia. Hope was always present, as was joy, as was pain and death. Don died of cancer of the body in 2016, with his heart and soul largely intact. The crux of the matter here is that mental illness and social deprivation are not immune to creative responses, imminent, self-organised responses without government intervention. There's evidence here that what used to be called the proletariat are not without tactics for resistance and joy. As a writer and human being, Collings is no stranger to the clockwork brutality of institutions and the crushing logics of low-cost housing. You can read all about that in his first autobiographical work, The Myth of Brilliant Summers. But there's nothing miserable about his realism, for imagination and hope are just as real. They're part of realism. Hope and imagination are real and important. The glow of the past need not signal softness or nostalgia, but rather illuminate styles of toughness, tenderness, ingenuity that we would do well not to lose. Allow me to read a little. I make my way in, the usual route, nose the rear door open. The smell of radiators replaces the scent of falling rain. We all need a place, and this one's mine. I walk the corridors, no one behind, no one ahead. I'm alone. My head is a calm church. The evening is more night now, a gathering shadow. My reflection in the corridor window, a ghostly orange crescent, a mock moon, glimpsed in the oncoming black. You have to learn how to be silent. Does death make a noise when it moves in? The corridors have been muted, my paws in front of me black, creeping down the paused lino, something vast and vulnerable, a lonely grandeur about my patterns of habit. It's funny how you look back at periods and they take on a glow they didn't have at the time. Even terrible periods and what you thought were terrible at the time, they can glow later on. This moment now, as I fall through the cracks of the floor of Prestwich Mental Hospital, victim of subsidence, I may come to see this as a glowing, glorious happening. Life-changing. I'm falling far from here, yet again. Gods who fall. God has given me all my light at once, and I will not fail. I get one last look up into the hospital above to see the ceiling lights for one last time, the corridors that saved me from the cold. These corridors were the medical definition of a miracle. They radiated saviour. I hear the patients clapping, a distant crackle like a policeman's radio. Good night all. Godspeed. See you in the morning, maybe. I had a dream one night, one of those dreams that isn't very different from being awake. I was him, the boiler man. I'd been murdered by a local taxi, flung into the menacing lines of a black tomorrow by a Datsun, car versus Fox again. Only ever one winner. The driver fled the scene, hit and run. Car after car bypassed my Fox corpse. It's tough to be somebody.